Hello everyone, and welcome to our webinar on KSP2, Ownership, the Secret Sauce to Successful Project Teams. I'd like to thank our friends at Ally Strategic Partners and the Fatwood Group for their help in developing both the material and the presentation. I'm Michael Bender with KSP Partnership, and I'll be leading you through this presentation. This presentation is based on my latest book, Culture's Competitive Edge, The Keys to Sustained Organizational Growth, which I co-authored with my good friend and boss, Ms. Kimmy Zimsky. Our continued research into improving organizational performance led us to the conclusion that organizational culture is actually more important to productivity than process. We aren't the only ones to have figured this out. As Peter Drucker once put it, culture eats strategy for breakfast. We designed the Key Success Parameters, or KSPs, to create an implementable framework for building organizational culture. Today we're focusing on KSP2, Ownership. It's my personal favorite of the KSPs, and I think you'll find out why very shortly. Before we start, just a few words about getting the most out of your seminar. Please pay attention and avoid distractions, and please participate. The more you participate, the more you'll learn and retain. Also, as we go through the material, try to see how it might have applied to either a past project or projects you're currently working on. This will help you be able to apply the material better back in the office. Also, please note that we are recording this, so please avoid last names and company secrets in your responses. I'll keep the chat and question box off the screen so they won't show in the recording. You can consider these safe areas. And let us proceed. One of my favorite topics, the 4 most misunderstood words in management, and they are responsibility, accountability, authority, and ownership. As we get into this with those in mind, what I'm going to do here is blank the screen. And I want to ask you all a question. And this is going to be a poll that will show up. How well do you feel that your organization as a whole delegates activities? Very well, pretty well, okay, wish it was better, or poorly. We got a couple coming in. We have no extremely well so far. A lot of okay, I wish it was betters. Only 13% said pretty well and 13 on poorly. Let me show you the results. Yeah, we've noticed that very few organizations really do a good job at delegating either projects or tasks, which was one of the key issues that caused us to enter into this whole cultural discussion. Let me ask one more of you, if I may. When you receive a delegation for an activity, what kind of authority do you have? Do you have cost? You are able to do cost and schedule estimates, and you can click all that apply here. Got a lot of people responding to this one. Most of you seem to favor that you're allowed to do the methodology or approach. That's excellent. The lowest one seems to be human resources. That only comes in at 3% now. About 2/3 of you get to pick the tools you use, and only about half of you are allowed to push back on unclear, realistic, or unrealistic expectations. So it looks like most of you can pick the approach, but only about half of you can push back on expectations, and only about 1/3 of you are allowed to determine what resources you need. We're going to talk about all these things as we go through the webinar. And I think you'll see this model does an excellent job of kind of tying this all together. Delegation seems so simple, yet, without a strong organizational culture, it is frequently misunderstood. This comes from the heart of clearly defining the roles and responsibilities within a project, or any endeavor for that matter. Clear definition is our #1 KSP and includes both roles and responsibilities, as well as defining the project and the work package requirements. One of the reasons for this boils down to, again, one of my favorite topics, 4 most misunderstood words in management. And they are responsibility, accountability, authority, and ownership. So in the chat box or question box, whichever you prefer, tell me what you think the definition of responsibility is. I have one person voting for ownership. Sadly, that's going to make it difficult. Yeah, the person who gets the job done. Held accountable. Again, if we keep crossing these words, it's going to be difficult to come up with definitions for each. One of the challenges when I was coming up with these definitions, I couldn't use any of the other words to define the word I was defining. There's going to be one violation of that, but we'll work on that when we get there. Seeing the job through. Assigned to provide a completion. That's a very nice one. I happen to like that. Yeah, in our world, accountability really boils down to one thing, a commitment to do the job right. I had difficulty coming up with a definition for this. I spent a lot of time looking at dictionaries, making sure I didn't use accountability and authority in there. And this is the one I came up with. And I find that this one works extremely well. Now, one of the interesting things about this is commitment cannot be delegated. The only thing you can do is ask for it. It comes from within. It comes from the person itself. How about accountability? What is your definition of accountability? Again, in the question or chat box. We have doing the work. This one isn't coming as quickly. People are struggling, I see, with this particular definition. Standing up to get the job done on time. Held to show results. Completing the work and meeting in milestones. Yeah, there's a challenge that comes with the 2 words, responsibility and accountability. One of the difficulties I had when I was working on this is coming up with dictionary definitions. And there's a rule in dictionaries that you can't have 2 words cross-referencing each other. I had 9 dictionaries. I'm sitting on the floor. I got 9 dictionaries open, and I'm looking at all of them, trying to figure out the difference between responsibility and accountability, and all 9 dictionaries cross-reference the 2. The challenge with cross-referencing two words to each other is that if you don't know the definition of either word, you can never resolve it. It just becomes an endless loop. So, one of the challenges we also had back then was every time somebody is held accountable, they get this fear in their head. They kind of feel like they're going to the IRS agent to get audited. There seems to be punitive action associated with accountability, and I didn't want that. And I suppose, ironically, I finally came up with a definition I like based on the root word account or accountant. So I said to myself, what do accountants do? Well, having gone through a couple recessions where accountants were doing perhaps what they shouldn't be doing, let's just refer to them as questionable accounting practices. I rephrased that to what should accountants do? Well, essentially, accountants should give me an accurate description of the financial status of my organization. What is accountability? Very simply, accurate, timely reporting. These are different definitions. It separates the words responsibility and accountability and allows us to capture both the commitment to do the job right as well as the reporting, the actual status and issues going on with a particular activity. The last one is authority. Now, authority seems to be a little bit easier for most people. Obviously, authority deals with the ability to make decisions or enact change. And the model that I use actually came from a former student of mine. And sadly, it was about 20 years ago, so I can't for the life of me recall who gave me this model, but I love the model. There are three things involved with authority. The first one is power. Now, obviously, if somebody makes a decision but nobody acts on it, that person doesn't have any power and their authority just really doesn't exist. The second one is permission. They're allowed to make that decision. The third one is the most interesting of the three, and that's protection. It basically says, go ahead and make the decision that you believe is right. If it doesn't work, don't worry about it. I will protect you. So if you consider somebody that's trying to make a decision, and on one hand, they have a decision that is the best for the project, and on the other hand, they have another choice, which is the safest decision. I want them to make the one that's best for the project, that they feel will do the project the most good. If it doesn't work, don't worry about it. I'll protect you. Now, the idea of all three of these is to try to remove punitive action. I want you to think clearly. I want you to focus on the project. I want you to make the right decisions for that project. And don't worry if they're wrong. We can fix it. That's what we do. Our final word is ownership. Now, we've used this as a definition for other words so far. If we can just take a look at what ownership means. And let's take it out of the project context for a minute. I own something. I own a pen, I own a house, I own a car. What does owning something mean? Again, in the chat or question box. It's mine to take care of. An obligation to take care of it. Control over that item. Responsible for, which again brings one of the other words back in. Yeah, this is the one I couldn't separate. Yeah, these are really great responses. Ownership, care and feeding of something. I like that definition. That's a good definition. Yeah, and understanding it becomes a significant part of that. Yeah, excellent. In our world, ownership is actually the synergistic integration of responsibility, accountability, and authority. So let's make this simple. We're going to ask for a commitment to do the job right. That's responsibility. And remember, we can't delegate responsibility. It's a commitment. It has to come from the person themselves. That's why we ask for it. The chat window, Igor's, should be towards the bottom. I think it's 2 tabs away from the question. Mine is, of course, all moved because I have multiple windows open, but it should be down there towards the bottom. And honestly, you can just continue responding in the questions. That's fine. The person has to show responsibility, a commitment to do the job right. They also then must demonstrate accountability. As they're performing the task, they have to accurately report on its status, and that includes problems. They have control of responsibility, they have control of accountability, and in response, I can give them authority. It forms a triangle, and we trainers love triangles. Triangles show balance. As any one side of this triangle moves or expands, we must be able to adjust the other sides of the triangle to compensate. So as someone is willing to take on more responsibility, they must also take on more accountability. And when they do, I will give them more authority. Now, should be an easy answer for most of you. Where would I put ownership in this model? Where does ownership? Yeah, I usually get some quick responses on this one. Yeah, ownership is the shape of the triangle. It's exactly what it is. And you can expand it by expanding your responsibility, your commitment to do larger things. You can expand it by increasing your accountability, the ability to accurately report as you go. And as those increase, I will gladly continue to give you more authority over larger things. Any questions so far before we move on? All right, well, let me give you some examples. So you can't see me now because I don't have my webcam on, but I'm currently taking notes with my favorite pen. This is my pen. I own this pen. It's mine. I paid for it and I bought it. What level of authority do I have over this pen? What can I do with it? Yeah, that's basically it, Seishan. I can do anything I want with this pen. It's mine. Well, within the law. There's a few things I can't do. I can't injure somebody with it, for example. But yeah, I can do anything I want with this pen. Now, you also, again, can't see me, but I happen to be wearing a watch that my wife gave me as a gift. Do I own this watch? Well, yeah, technically, yes. Yeah, I usually get a split answer on this. I get some people that say, yeah, you own it, and others that say, no, no way. And I seem to be getting that. But not really. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, so I mean, let's take this to an extreme. So let's pretend I'm going to some event, and there's some really attractive woman there. I could give her my pen, couldn't I? And that would be fine. Nobody would care. If I gave this beautiful woman my watch, what would happen? Well, none of you know my wife, but let's just say it would involve a dull, rusty knife applied to certain various critical parts of my body. I own the pen. It is mine. I have full and complete authority over it. I do not own my watch. I am its caretaker. I love it. I love wearing it. It was a wonderful gift, but I am its caretaker. I am not its owner. With an understanding of our ownership model, we now have the ability to start to apply this model in real life. And this is really the heart of what we came to talk about today. So we're going to talk about taking this model in a project environment, and we're going to talk about how do we delegate tasks, how do we delegate ownership, and why do we delegate ownership? And then we're going to handle one of the interesting challenges that comes when we try to do this, and that's, dealing with the pushback. So let's start off delegating tasks. We did a poll earlier that asked you how you were all doing on your task delegation, and most of you said, yeah, the organization's kind of okay. We wish it could get better. Some of you said very poorly. It was 13%, if I wrote down my numbers correctly. And a number of you, about 13% said, well, pretty well. Nobody said excellent. The ownership model gives us an excellent way of being able to delegate tasks. And as of course, if you know, we don't delegate tasks anymore. What we do is delegate deliverables. And the reason we do this is very simple. I don't care how hard you work. I don't care how much effort you put into something. It's the deliverable that I need from you before I can move on with the rest of the project. So if I give somebody an assignment to, I don't know, design some component of some deliverable or build some component of some deliverable, the thing I need is that component or that design. To some degree, the amount of effort it takes to do that is really not relevant. Certainly, it might affect time and cost. But without the deliverable, I can't move on in my project. It's the deliverable that becomes important. 3 of our other KSPs come into this play. And the first one is, of course, clear definition. We've already talked a little bit about clear definition. Clear definition, when we usually talk about it, we usually talk about meeting measurable specific requirements. So if I give somebody an assignment, and again, remember, it's the deliverable I care about, they need to know exactly what that deliverable is. So what do? We give them clear, measurable requirements or specifications for that deliverable. That way they know what they're doing. Certainly I can't ask somebody to build something if they don't know what they're building. So even at the component level, we provide clear, measurable requirements or specifications for that deliverable. That way the individual or team knows exactly what they have to build. The second one here is KSP3, Customer Deliverable Focus. There are 2 aspects of this KSP that are relevant. And interestingly enough, the first one deals with motivation. Team members tend to be more motivated when they see how their deliverable contributes to the customer. They know where their piece fits in the puzzle. They know they're contributing to the benefit of the organization and of the customer, and they tend to be more motivated. The second is scope management. This is a particular issue, especially in the technology fields. And I'm allowed to say this because I was an engineer. I have a double E degree. Engineers and programmers especially, it's not our fault. That's the way we're wired. It's how we're brought up. It's how we're trained. We are continuously trying to improve our skills as well as the products we build. That's just what we do. And while there's certainly a benefit to doing both, in projects that can lead to a problem. We need to have them focus on the customer. This means not improving the product beyond what the customer asked for. Once the individual or team has met requirements, They just simply need to finish it and move on. And as a programmer and engineer both, I always found that challenging when I was involved in projects. You know, I know I can get another 3 dB out of this amplifier, or I know I can save a few milliseconds of compute power with reworking some of this code. Meet customer requirements and move on. And the last one is rigorous quality. And this is one that I find is generally missing in most organizations. So again, I'm going to ask you, and let me launch this particular poll. What percentage of components, not just deliverables, but components of your project are actually verified by independent sources? Got a lot of people voting on this one. I'll go for a few more, and we'll bring up the results. I seem to be getting kind of a reverse bell-shaped curve on this. More people on the outside than in the insides. Give a few more people a few more chances to vote. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close it. This is an interesting result. I tend not to get this in a lot of the discussions and seminars that I do. Usually you get kind of a bell-shaped curve where it's low on the outsides and high on the insides. This one seems to be a bit different. I see more than a third have 0 to 25% of their components quality checked by an independent source. Only about a quarter do 25 to 50%. 18% do 50 to 75%, but a quarter of you do 75% to 100% of your work packages are actually quality controlled by an outside source. So for those of you who voted on that top one, 75 to 100%, do you find that this improves the productivity of your teams and of your projects in either the chat box or the question box? Yeah, that's what I find. They raise issues. It's one of the key elements of having tasks cross-checked by an outside resource. If you have somebody that's going to come in and look at the work that you've done, and you have good, clear, measurable, verifiable requirements, they tend to focus on those requirements. It's like taking a test. They don't want to fail the test. Yeah, and they address issues quickly. It is one of the great benefits that I've seen out of this particular technique. Give them clear, measurable, verifiable requirements, and then cross-check. As I indicated, one of the key tools we like using for this is peer reviews. And peer reviews are just wonderful things. They increase team development. It is a wonderful teaching mechanism as well. So some of the masters or just some of the other people with different perspectives can offer great suggestions to people who are being peer reviewed. We do it in our company constantly. We quality review everything. I happen to have this wonderful virtual admin by the name of Vicky, who she checks everything before it goes out. She's just really good at it. So, delegation. First of all, we do not delegate tasks, we delegate deliverables or components. We clearly define the deliverable with measurable, testable, verifiable requirements. We ensure the individual or team member understands how their deliverable contributes to the customer, and we verify completion of the deliverable through quality checks. Our next topic is the delegation of ownership. And again, 3 other KSPs are going to come into play. Well, you already know that we can't delegate responsibility and accountability. Those have to come from the individuals themselves. The only thing we can do is ask for it. We can delegate authority, but we need to have the responsibility and accountability in place before we can do that. So here's how it works. You go up to someone and you tell them you'd like to have them create some deliverable or components for your project. You provide them with measurable requirements. You tell them it's theirs. They have full authority over the deliverable. They can ask for help or advice from any resource they want. They give the estimates. They decide the tools they need. They decide how it should be done. And in return, you ask them for a commitment to do the job right and the accountability to report on status. You tell them, if you have a problem, you just come tell me. No yelling, no screaming. You're not going to be sent to the principal's office. We just fix the problem. Then ask for the commitment. Now, if you haven't done this before, it's kind of scary the first time. After all, I found most managers feel they're so much smarter than the people that work for them. But you're giving up a lot of control. I remember the first time I did this, panic and fear entered my head as I realized I just wasn't going to have control of this thing anymore. I used to read Edgar Allan Poe stories, and they gave me less fear than this did the first time I did this. And as you start to do this, what you will see is you're going to get some pushback, and that's okay. As we'll see on the next slide, this is actually a good reaction. But let's finish this topic first, then we'll get into that particular topic. Our first KSP is KSP4, collaborative spirit. Having full authority doesn't mean they have to make decisions in a vacuum. Encourage them to ask for opinions, ask for help, ask for advice from anyone they deem useful. In some cases, you can even advise them to consult with particular SMEs. And here's the key. A lot of people are afraid of doing this because they are afraid that they will lose some level of control. Ooh, pardon me. Let me get rid of that. Thank you very much, Lisa. Too many windows open. So people don't want to lose control over their authority over an activity. But with ownership, they don't lose control. They can advise or ask advice from anybody they want. This actually falls into the category of responsibility. A commitment to do the job right means you ask for and get all the information you possibly can. Our second KSP is KSP5, intertask dependency, and this can be a nasty one. Projects form a complex network of interrelated tasks. Each task has multiple predecessors. For those of you who may not be PMPs or have studied this, these are the activities that produce your inputs. In other words, the activities that come before you. And every activity has multiple successors. When you create your deliverables, these go somewhere. These goes to other individuals or team members as their inputs. Responsibility means the owner communicates with the preceding activity owners to ensure that that owner is getting what they expect, as well as the owners of the successive activities, so that if there are changes in yours or if there's going to be a delay, they know about it and they can respond. Note that this, of course, also aids KSP4 collaborative spirit as it broadens and increases the amount of communication between team members. These two KSPs form the heart of clearly defined roles and responsibilities within the team. Everybody knows who the owners are. Everybody is allowed to contribute, but the owner gets to make the decisions. Nowhere along here do we remove that authority. Everybody collaborates, they all communicate, they all work together, and it's amazing the kind of productivity you can get out of your teams with these two. Our final one is KSP7. Projects are unique endeavors, and of course, as such, they tend to have risks. So we ask the activity owners to take on their own risks, understand what risks or concerns they have, and then proactively manage and communicate those risks as they occur. And our last topic today is managing the pushback. I love it when somebody pushes back. What it means to me is they're making the commitment to do this thing right, and they can't do it right if they feel that there's some kind of issue with it. Either there's too short a time frame or it's not clearly defined. Predecessors or successors may be unknown. When somebody pushes back, that means they want to do it right, and they just want to make sure the scenario is set up for that. So I actually encourage pushback. Excuse me for just a second. I had a small tickle in my throat there. Work package owners cannot accept responsibility or cannot accept accountability on ownership if tasks are ill-defined, predecessors and successors are unknown, or their time or cost constraints are unrealistic. And remember, the time and cost constraints are theirs, so that should be included in your project plan anyway. There shouldn't be an issue with this. Resources are needed and expected to complete the tasks, and we make sure that all the predecessors are done before we assign it. In PMI land, this is called work authorization. Don't start a task until you have all the things you need and you're ready to go. And of course, our work package owners are allowed to manage their own risks as long as they communicate and manage them. So in summary, we've talked about the four most misunderstood words in management: accountability, responsibility, authority, and ownership. We looked at how these interrelate in the ownership model. Responsibility and accountability come from the individual themselves. Ownership is the one thing we can delegate, and the amount of authority we delegate is responsible of their level to commit to an activity and to report on that activity. And we've closed up with how to apply the ownership model in a real project: delegating deliverables, delegating ownership, and delegating handling feedback. At this point, I'd like to open the floor up to some Q&A. If you have a question, concern, opinion, a different viewpoint, please feel free to enter it either in the chat box or the question box. Well, either I'm the world's greatest instructor. Can we have copies of the slides? Yes, you can, Lisa. If you look in your handouts, you will see copies of the slides. You should be able to download that. Glad to hear that, Alan. Excellent, Lisa. Thank you. Wow, my presentation skills must be getting better. Nobody's having any questions. How do you address the lack of accountability when it comes to deliverables? Um, I kind of alluded to this in the webinar itself, but really didn't highlight it. Um, as I indicate, when I'm running a project, there's only one thing that can cause a punitive action, and that's hiding something from me. Now, this can be a bit tricky. A lot of people have been trained uh, to hide problems. When I was younger, and if you haven't figured this out yet, I'm kind of an old guy at this point. When I was younger, you didn't go to your boss with a problem unless you had a solution. Well, what if you can't come up with a solution quickly? You don't go to your boss. And back then it was very common for bosses to literally yell at you because you came to them with a problem. So if somebody yells at you, if you come to them with a problem, you're not going to come to them with problems anymore. And of course, I can't fix a problem if I don't know it's there. I don't expect you to be perfect. We don't spell most of your names G-O-D. You know, if there's an issue, come to me. It is my job as project manager to help you fix it. Now, if you have somebody that's been beaten up, if you have somebody that typically hides things, it's not their fault. It's simply they've been mismanaged at some point, either at home or at work. It'll take a few iterations, but at some point, the fact that they have an issue is going to come out. And that's when you thank them and congratulate them for talking to you. And the only thing you do is solve the problem. And then you send them on their way. And then after a few iterations of that, they'll start opening up and they will start to become extremely accountable. It works really well. I've done it many times. How do you get started with this ownership delegation? Talk it through first with a group. I assume that's or an individual. Lisa, what I would do if you haven't tried to do this before, I would get the group together and just kind of explain what I'm doing. And one of the key rules I have in project management is every activity, every deliverable has an owner, and just explain to them the owner has full authority, but this is what I need from you, and do that as a group, just so that you've set group expectations. And then as you start to delegate activities and deliverables, again, sit down with them and say, remember the model, remember we're going to try this. I'm new at this, and I would, if I'm trying something new, Lisa, I would always say that. So I'm new at this as well. I may not be perfect at it, so please let me know if there's some way I can do this better. And give them the deliverable, ask them for the estimates, ask them what resources they need, make sure they have everything they need to have in their hands, and then ask for the commitment. And I find that works very smoothly for me. Did that help answer your question, Lisa? Yes, I will put the recording up. I don't record the initial part, so what I do is I re-record the initial part, and I will have that for you probably tomorrow, because I have to do a bit of editing on it to get the front part set up. So I will have that tomorrow, and I'll make sure everybody gets an email with a link to that recording. And Richard, what do you think about the situation where, oops, it moved on me. What do you think about ideally, we like to see the ownership monitoring being balanced equilateral at best. Yeah, I go for equilateral, Richard. They become skewed. If you think about my watch, if you remember the watch my wife gave me, my responsibility on it is huge. My accountability on it is huge. My authority over it is very tiny. It forms a needle. And in a classroom, I actually draw this on a flip chart. In a classroom, what I do is in the middle of the triangle, I call it management by fear. And that's what a lot of managers actually do. Yeah, so you try to make it equilateral. Yeah, if you have, that's exactly the responsibility and accountability, but no authority. That's the needle. That's accountability by fear. I'm going to tell you what to do. I'm going to tell you how to do it. And when you screw it up, I'm going to yell at you. That's management by fear. And I just don't do that. Let me see if there's any other questions. The name of the new book is Culture's Competitive Edge. And Kimmy is the primary author on that. And her last name is Ziemski. I am showing up on the staff side of your attendance list as Kimmy, so that's how you spell her name. And, or you can look it up using me. It'll be one of the 6 books I've written, Michael Bender. And what else do we have? Yeah, Igor, I know, no worries, mate. All right, for those of you, we are coming up on the bottom of the hour. Before we go too far, I want to thank you for attending. Again, wishing thanks to the Fatwood Group for their help. They have helped us develop improved techniques on presentations. And if you want to check them out, they are at thefatwoodgroup.org. And if I might, you will find my speaker site at michaelbbender.com. I also run The Value Strategist. That's one of my blog sites. I have been RSS feeding that, but I will actually be starting more formal blogs on that site as well. And before you all go, I would be delighted if you would please complete our post-webinar survey. And I will leave this up, and I will also put it in the chat box. So that's https:// the good old Survey Monkey. I don't know what we would do without it. 38 YYRS8M. So there in the chat box is the link to the survey. And have I gotten all the questions? Hey, got that, I got that. Did I answer everybody's questions? Is everybody good? Thank you all very, very much for attending. I really appreciate it. I hope you got a lot out of this webinar. Our next one will be in September on the 19th, and we will talk more about inter-task dependencies and how to link all those so that your projects run very, very smoothly. And we'll start publishing that one towards the end of July, so just kind of keep an eye out for that one. And thank you all for attending. Please do the survey, and I look forward to talking with you very soon. I'll leave this slide up to help you with the survey for a few minutes. Take care.